Good morning. Here we are at Temple Baptist Church again, and the Shiloh Sunday School class, and we have crossed the Red Sea, and we've had another big crossing since the last time we met, and we have begun a new year where the Exodus has started. The Hebrew people have left Egypt, and they've left Ramses, and they've come across the Red Sea, and now they're in these cities that we'll be talking about, or not really cities, but villages and places that we'll be talking about here are on the west side of the Sinai Peninsula, and they will be making their way down to the southern end of the Sinai Peninsula to Mount Sinai. And so anyway, this lesson basically is about God's provision for all these people while they're making this trip. And that's one side of the story, and the other side of the story is about their murmuring and complaining about the different issues that have come up. And God's trying to teach them some things here. It begins in chapter 16, and verses 11 through 15 is the very beginning of this thing, and we're going to read those few verses. We're going to start back up here in chapter 16, verse 1, and it says, "And they took their journey from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came into the wilderness of Zin." That word there in your King James Bible is sin, like S-I-N, but it's pronounced Zin, Z-I-N, and because it had nothing to do with sin at all. It says, "Came into the wilderness of Zin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departing out of the land of Egypt." So there's some time that's gone by, and if we remember, they were eating unleavened bread, and they were keeping this up, and this was going on and on and on. Well, now the bread supply has begun to dwindle, and the water supply. We have to remember and keep in the back of our mind that there's about 2 million people involved in this Exodus, this thing that they're leaving, and they have left on a good note with God, and they've praised God. And in fact, chapter 15 is the song that they have sang after the crossing of the Red Sea. It's the first song that's mentioned in the Bible, in the Pentateuch, the Torah here, the very first part of it. But that those first verses in there, chapter 15 and verses 1 through 21 is that song of praise to the Lord. Well, it's always easy to praise God when everything's going good, and you're up on a mountaintop and you're charging on and you don't see anything but good, but they're about to run out of food and run out of water, and they're beginning to get a little grouchy about this, and so it says there, to drop down on that, we see God telling Moses to relay to the people that He's going to provide their needs as they go, and he's trying to teach them that he's not asleep. God's not up in heaven somewhere sitting on a throne napping. He's not asleep. He knows what's going on, but we don't learn, we don't grow down in the valley. We are up on a mountaintop. I mean, we grow down in the valleys when things are not so rosy and easy to get along, and so God's going to try to teach these people that to have trust in Him, to have patience, that His timing is always right. When He does things, it's the right way to do things. And so, we can take that thing of teaching them trust and patience, and then we can define that as faith. He's trying to teach them that you've got to have faith and walk by faith. And, that's no different for them than it is for us. We have to walk by faith every day, and things are going on around us, and we see those issues, and it just really blows our boat out of the water sometimes. And back in the book of Hebrews in chapter 12, verse 1 over in the New Testament, it talks there about the sin that so easily besets us, and that sin is unbelief, and that can really slip in and slide into our psychic before we're really aware of it sometime. And that's when Paul wrote that. I believe Paul wrote the book of Hebrews, that this sin so easily besets us. It just slips in when we're not looking. But for these people, this was reality. You know, I don't know how many of y'all, or if any of y'all have ever gone very long without water, but that's a tough thing. You're not going to live very long when you don't have any water. And these people, they have their kids, they have their families with them and all that, and they're beginning to suffer. And it says there in verse 11, and the Lord spake unto Moses, and that's a key thing, because down there in the early part of this, in chapter 16, verse 2, actually, they were complaining to Moses and Aaron because they were their leaders. They were doing it, but the Bible word for that is murmuring. They were murmuring and complaining. The word means complaining. In some of your translations, it will have that. That's the word that it uses rather than murmurings. It'll have complaining in there. And that's what they were doing. It says here in verse 2, it says, and the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And they're going on so far as to say, well, we've been better off if we just stayed in Egypt. And they'd already forgot about all the people that were dying and the 430 years of slave labor and all that kind of thing. They just forgot about all that. And they were focusing not on God that performed the miracle through the Red Sea and the decimating of Pharaoh's army, and that they forgot about all that, those miracles that God had already done for them. And so now they're not on the mountaintop anymore. They're down in the valley, and reality is setting in that, hey, these natural resources that we have to have, we don't have, and we're starting to suffer from that. And so to move on with that, in verse 4 it says, then said the Lord unto Moses, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove them or test them whether they will walk in my law or not. Excuse me. And there's this situation here where God's going to test them to see if they're going to obey, because they've been doing pretty good so far, but now, are we going to walk with God just when things are good, or are we going to walk with Him all the time, day after day after day? And this is what He's teaching these people. And so anyway, in verse 11 it says that, then the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, I have heard the murmurings of the complaining of the children of Israel. Speak unto them, saying, at evening you shall eat flesh, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God. And that's the key right there, to try to teach them that God's there and God cares. And there again, we are caught up in that cycle sometimes, that, when everything's going good and we don't have any issues, God's good. But then whenever things don't go so good and we have to deal with life as it comes down to us, it gets really, really hard. And so we have to always remember and know that I am the Lord, that God said, I am the Lord your God. That phrase there, your God, it's an important phrase, because they've been living for the last 400 plus years under Egyptian godship, I guess you might say. The Egyptians were known to have as many as 2,000 gods, more or less, and they've been steeped in that kind of religion type thing, being a very religious thing. But now he says, your God, I am the Lord, Yahweh, your God. and that your personal God. And it says, and it came to pass that at evening, that could have been from 3 to 6 o'clock in the afternoon, the quails come up. Now, there's only 3 other places in the Bible where it talks about these quail. Well, actually 2 others besides this one, over in the book of Numbers, and then over in the book of Psalms it talks about these quails. And they're not quail like we think of. They were kind of a pointed-nosed bird, and they flew real close to the ground, and they couldn't fly very far. They were pretty much ground dwellers and ground feeders, but the word that the translators used in the King James Bible was the word quails, and so anyway, that's what they were familiar with. I wish we were still seeing quail in this part of the country, but I haven't seen any quail here in a long time. But we focus on this thing of this personal God, and we tend, again, this is Sunday school, and so we have to look at these things that we are so materialistic, if we're not really careful, that we get our minds off of God and we look at the material things, and for us in this country, if we're not really careful, things become our God. The man-made things or materialistic things, and we just really have to guard against that. This thing about these quail, as near as I can figure, and studying, this is kind of a one-shot deal. This is not something that happened every day. These birds were migrating through, and the people were. They gathered them up, and they had meat to eat, it says there, and so they did. Even in your Sunday school lesson, your lesson book, the commentators, the people that wrote those, they even mentioned there that this was probably a one-shot thing. The thing about these birds coming through, and their migration route carried them right through there, and I'm not making an excuse or anything. God arranged this, and I give all the credit to God. Not that I really have any say-so in the matter, but because it's happened, and that's the way it happened, and it was in God's providence when He did that. And so don't get the idea that I'm kind of judging God or trying to put Him in a box, because I'm not. But that's that deal there. That's the way it is, and they goes on and he says there, and beginning back over here in verse 11, it says, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, I've heard the murmuring of the children of Israel. Speak unto them, saying, at evening you shall eat flesh, or the quails, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God. And it came to pass that at evening the quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay round about the host. And when the dew that lay was gone up, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there lay a small round thing, as small as the hoarfrost on the ground. And so they had this frost, this thing that was under this frost that was. It was this manna, and the word manna there, it just means, what is it? We don't know what this is, but they asked this question, and Moses' response to this was, this is the bread which the Lord has given you, and they have to take this, and they probably made it into cakes or something like that, but that's what they had to eat, and they ate this for the next 40 years, actually, maybe a little bit longer. They're going to come to the place where they rebel, but anyway, that's another story for another time. But they're going to have to eat this manna for a long time, and it's interesting, as I always read after J. Vernon McGee and a couple of different others and commentaries to prepare for these lessons, and besides the thing that they all seem to agree that this quail stuff was a one-shot thing, that this manna was something that it suited each individual's taste, and so it did not get old right off the bat. We see later on as we progress through the book of Exodus, we'll see where it did get old with them. But you know, they were never happy. They might be for a little while, kind of like we are. You know, things go along and we're plugging right along and everything's going good, and the next thing you know, we begin to find fault with one thing or another, and we can't keep this shut sometimes, and we have to back up and regroup and get over that. But the thing about Moses here that really stood out to me in this was that Moses, he did not try to take credit for anything. Of course, they'd already been on him and Aaron pretty hard, and but he did not take credit for that. He said, "The Lord hath given this to you." It's take a step back and just think of where your blessings have come from. Think what He's already done for you, and that's a good lesson for us today. My goodness, you know, when there's issues. There's issues all the time. And I think in our family and in our life, just like yours, and you know, we deal with it and we go on, but don't lose track of the good things that God does and has done in our lives over the past years and years, and you know, a good family, a good church, a good place to live, and you know, a roof over your head, and all those things are blessings from God, and we just ought not slip away from that mindset, that thinking about that. We really should not. And so anyway, it's easy to do, the sin that so easily besets us. We need to keep our eyes up, looking up towards the Lord, and know that He's in charge and He will provide. It goes on to ask a question in there, and it goes down to verse 16. But the question says, "What are some things that are easy to complain about? What do you do when you catch yourself complaining?" And hopefully the Holy Spirit inside you will pick you up and say, "Hey, you might need to back off of that a little bit and count your blessings and see what God hath done," is the way the song goes. So anyway, it drops down there then in verse 16, and it says, "This is a thing which the Lord hath commanded. Gather of it every man according to his eating, an omer for every man." And this is talking about the manna that is there. It's not talking about quail, it's talking about the manna. It says an omer for every man. And that omer, and in our day and time, was about 2 quarts. And he says that every man according to his eating, or whatever his appetite was, to get that number of it, that much of it, according to the number of your people, and get enough for your family. And it says, "And take ye every man for them which are in his tents." And the children of Israel did so, and gathered some more and some less. And when they did measure it out with an omer, he that gathered much had nothing left over, and he that gathered little had no lack. There was plenty. Whether you needed a lot to feed your family or needed a little, there was always just enough to take care of it. And Moses said, and then here comes the I guess you might say the minus side of it, but really it's not. It's a plus side, because it's a warning, and it's a word from God, from Moses to the people, to don't try to store it up. Don't try to hoard it and stash it, because that's not going to be a good thing if you do. This was not, I wrote a little note here in my book that this was not a prepared salad bar. This was something that was a provision for God, and it was not over providing or under providing. It was enough to take care of their needs, and not necessarily their wants, but their needs. And the words tell us not to that they were not to store this up because it was going to go bad really quick, just in overnight. And even this collecting this was just a test. Why does God test us? Why not just make everything easy and we just go right on through? And tests come to strengthen us. We don't take tests at school just to make us feel bad if we don't do good with them, or to feel better than we should if we do real good in a test. But it's to teach us areas where we need to pay a little more attention, get a little stronger. In this case, get a little stronger in the Lord. And so that's what this is about. It's kind of interested with this that the people had to do something. God provided for them, but they had to kind of get off their rear ends and get out and go gather this up and do it the way God said. And so there's this thing here. If you don't work, you don't eat. I mean, just to put it down in 4 words, if you don't work, you don't eat. You've got to get out there and do this. And so God said, okay, on the Sabbath day. By the way, this is the first time the Sabbath is mentioned in the Bible. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath, and it was a time for rest. And so at that time they had a double portion in that. It jumps on down through this chapter, and it goes over into chapter 17. By the way, if you want to look and follow up, you can go over into the book of Numbers in chapter 11 or over in chapter 33, and you can see where these lessons are reiterated again over and in more detail over there actually. But we finish up here in chapter 17, and it's we come back to this thing again. The people here, and this is getting serious with these. They've got food now. They've got meat to eat. They've had manna to eat, all they need, not too much, but all they need. But then it goes on there in chapter 17, verses 1 through 6, and it says, the congregation of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Zin after their journeys according to the commandment of the Lord, and pitched in Rephidim, and there was no water. This is the last stop, I believe, it talks about over in the book of Numbers before they come to Mount Sinai. And it was they had left Elim, which was it was an oasis. I think it had 6 or 7 springs of water and palm trees around, and it was a really nice place. But they couldn't stay there. You can't stay on the mountaintop where everything's easy all the time. You just cannot do it. And if we did, we'd run it if we were going there. But I'm not going to go any further than that. But it says in verse 1 of chapter 17, but there was no water for the people to drink. Wherefore the people did chide with Moses, and that word there, chide, is almost coming to blows with him about the not being any water, and chide with Moses and said, give us water that we may drink. And Moses said unto them, why argue with me? Why are you tempting the Lord like this? They've just forgot about all the blessings that God has poured out with them. And it goes on there and it talks about how that God told Moses to go smite the rock with his rod, and he did, and water came out, and they had all the water they could drink. And that's kind of, in the interest of closing this out, that's kind of the end of the thing. But the bottom line on this whole deal is that how easy it is for all of us to forget what all the good things that God has done for us, and how He's blessed us day after day after day. And that when we see things that we don't agree with, well, maybe we ought to back up and regroup and see if it's us that's in error, because we know it's not God. We may not understand all that comes down the pike, but because we don't understand it don't mean that it's wrong. And God will have His will done before it's all said and done. So that's pretty much the lesson for today. And I like to encourage you to come out to Temple Baptist Church and come to us. We have our 8 o'clock service, and then we have a 9 o'clock Sunday school, and then 10 o'clock worship service again. And we'd like to have you come up to, of course, our Sunday school class, which is a Shiloh Sunday school class. And we'd love to have you and love to see you. So it's a little late to say Happy New Year, but I hope and pray you have a good one. And so come back and see us next week.